All right, so this is Math 209, Week 3, Section 8.4. We're going to be performing arithmetic on functions. It sounds fancy, but it's not. All right, so what does that mean? Okay, so when you are performing arithmetic on functions, so you've got these two functions right here. You've got f of x, and I'll write that right here, f of x, and that's 6x minus 8. And then you've got f of x, g of x, that's just another name of another formula, and that's equal to 2x squared. So now, what that means is if you're going to find out what f plus g of 7 is, what that means is you're going to find f of 7, and then you're going to find g of 7. And that's a fancy way of saying you're going to replace the x with the 7 that they're telling you. So this becomes 6 times 7 minus 8. So that becomes 42 minus 8. And that becomes, oh, gee whiz, 30, oh, gee whiz, 34. Thank you. All right, 34. And then over here, this becomes 2 times 7 squared. So that's 2 times 49. And so that's 2 times 9, that equals 98. All right, so now that you know that f of 7 is 34, and g of 7 is 98, we can now solve this problem. So f plus g of 7 means you're going to find f of 7, and you're going to add g of 7. And we already know that f of 7 is 34. And we already know that g of 7 is 98, because it says so right here and right here. And so now we add, and so we get 34 plus 98, so that's 132. So it's 132. So that is your answer for f plus g of 7. All right. So now, if we're going to do the same thing, we're going to do, only now it's going to be f minus g of negative 6. So what I'm going to do is I have to copy the I want f of x, and what is that? F of x is 6x minus 8, and then g of x is 2 times x squared. All right, so we got that little equation here. These are the two equations, and we are supposed to be doing that for negative 6, and we're going to subtract them. All right, so we know that what we want is f minus g of negative 6. So that means we're going to do f of negative 6, and then we're going to subtract g of negative 6. So now we need to do the math to figure out what these two values are. So we're going to go up here, and we are going to substitute negative 6. So that becomes 6 times negative 6 minus 8. So that equals negative 36 minus 8. That equals negative 44. And then g of negative 6 is going to be 2 times negative 6 squared. So that becomes 2 times 36. So that becomes 72. So when we go back up here, right here, if we want to figure out what f minus g of negative 6 is, we're going to first figure out f of negative 6. Well, it's right here. It's negative 44 minus g of negative 6 is 72. So it becomes negative 44 minus, was that 72? Yeah, 72. Right here, 72. And when you do that math, you end up with, you have to add the opposite. So that ends up being negative, 116. All right. And we're going to just keep going on this. We got a lot of work to do. So if we want to know, now we're going to do, let me zoom in here. Okay, now we're going to do FG of 3. All right, so we're going to move over here, and I'm going to paste in my two formulas. And we want to do FG of 3. All right, so what does that mean? Well, it means we're going to multiply. So we're going to find the two values when x is 3, and then we're going to multiply them. So you've got 6 times 3 minus 8. That's 18 minus 8. That's 10. So we've got 10. And then over here, we've got 2 times 3 squared. So that's 2 times 9, which is 18. And so if we want to know f g of 3, that means we're going to find f of 3, and we're going to times it by g of 3. So that means 10 times 18, which is 180. All right? And then the last one, exact same concept, only now it's division. And we want f divided by g of 0. All right, so what is that going to look like? So we want f divided by g of 0. What is that equal to? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our two equations right here. Those are the two that they gave us. And we're going to let x be 0. So this is going to be 6 times 0 minus 8, which is 0 minus 8, which is negative 8. And then over here, that's going to be 2 times 0 squared, which is equal to 2 times 0, which is equal to 0. So now, if we want to figure out f divided by g of 0, what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to do f of 0 divided by g of 0. Well, what is that? Well, that's equal to negative 8 divided by 0. You're never allowed to have 0 in your denominator, so this answer is undefined. Undefined. So this is another example. So this happens to be what, question 2. All right, so this is question 2, and question 2 is just like question 1, only now we're not actually going to substitute x for any particular value. And so what that means is when it says f plus g of x, so f plus g of x, that means we're just going to do f of x and add it to g of x. That's all. So that means we're going to take x plus 6, because that's f of x, and we're going to add it to x plus 1, because that's g of x. And when you add that together, you get 2x plus 7, and you are done. So now, if we want to do subtract, so if we want to subtract, so you're going to do f minus g of x, and so that means you're going to do f of x, and you're going to subtract g of x. Well, we know that f of x is x plus 6, and then we're going to subtract x plus 1. Now we have to put parentheses here because that is an entity. That's itself. And so now we need to simplify this, and so we have to kind of go back to earlier math, like 208. And we know that since there's no coefficient and it's positive, that means we can drop the drop the parenthesis and not have to worry. But here, we're going to have to distribute the negative. And that means we're going to get negative x minus 1. And now simplifying this, we see that, okay, we've got x and minus x are like terms, and they equal 0. And then positive 6 minus 1, that equals positive 5. And so there's your answer. So the subtraction, your answer is 5. And I think the next question is saying, okay, so we've added, we've subtracted, now we're going to multiply fg of x. So fg of x. And what does that mean? Well, it means get the value for f of x and multiply by g of x. All right, so we know that f of x is x plus 6. We know that g of x is x plus 1. And we're supposed to multiply these two guys together. So how do we do that? Well, we use the box. X plus 6, x plus 1. So you get x squared plus 1x plus 6x plus 6. So your answer is x squared plus 7x plus 6. X squared plus 7x plus 6. And that is your answer. X squared plus 7x plus 6. And then the last one is we are supposed to divide those two. And I want to check to make sure I'm right. Yep. We are supposed to divide them. So when we divide them, you've got f divided by g of x, and that's really f of x divided by g of x. So that means it's going to be x plus 6 divided by x plus 1, and you're done. Nothing you can do. A lot of students want to try and cancel out the x's, but you're not allowed to do that because this is a whole number right here. X plus 6 is a number. You can't just like cross off half a number or something like that. We've got, again, we're going to add, subtract, multiply, and divide these two functions. All right, and so the important thing is to know that f of x is equal to 1 minus x. G of x is equal to 2 times x squared. And so if we are going to add them, that means f plus g of x is the same thing as f of x plus g of x. And so that gives us 1 minus x plus 2x squared. There are no like terms, so technically we are done, although traditionally we try and put our equation in descending terms, but there you go. So now we're going to subtract. So f minus g of x. So that's going to be 1 minus x minus 2x squared. And there are no like terms. We can drop this because there is no, we could drop this, the parentheses, because there's no coefficient and it's positive. And so traditionally we rearrange. So we're going to get negative 2x squared minus x plus 1. That's our subtraction. Oops. And now we're going to multiply. So that becomes fg of x. So that's the same thing as f of x times g of x. So f of x is 1 minus x times g of x, 2x squared. So we've got to simplify that. So simplifying, we're going to use the distributive property. So you end up with 2x squared minus 2x cubed, and you are done. And then the last one is division. So division, you've got f divided by g of x. So that's going to be f of x divided by g of x. So f of x is 1 minus x. G of x is 2x squared. There's nothing to simplify. Can't cross off the x's. And so we are officially done.